This is Tim Lackey, and thanks for clicking on the video. I'm building a Michalak-designed AF4G, a 21-foot plywood skiff, to use in the shallow creeks of Chesapeake Bay. This is episode 3, all about the port side of the hull, lofting the shape and connecting the plywood sheets into one panel. Hope you enjoy it. So the plywood for the boat has arrived. This is 11 sheets of Okume plywood. This is great plywood. It's cream of the crop for plywood, honestly. Every layer is basically almost as good as what you see on top. And it'll take epoxy and paint and whatever very well. 5 sheets of 15 mil, 5/8. That's this stuff on top. 6 sheets of 9 millimeter that are on the bottom. So I'm going to move this 5/8 stuff off the top so I can get my hull sheets out. I made a dumb mistake and didn't order enough plywood. I looked at this drawing and I counted 6 sheets of 9 millimeter, which is what's shown here. But what I didn't account for was that, of course, there are 2 sides, so each side requires 3 sheets of plywood. I have enough plywood to make the 2 sides, but I'm going to need 3 more sheets in order to make all the parts required. The next order of business in this boat is to lay out and cut out the hull panels. So this is the layout for the top sides. It's 2 pieces. Mirror image, make sure we have 2 insides and 2 outsides. But it's most of 3 sheets of plywood. This particular layout uses almost the entire things, except for a little room for the smallest bulkhead left at the end. And these are all laid out on mostly on 24-inch stations, starting at the stem. I'm working aft. And the top of this deck line right there is straight, so that's the top edge of the plywood, and then the measurements come down from there to define the slight curvature in the hull here, and then back here it'll define this combing and some of the other shapes. So I started off here. I'm just going to lightly screw these sheets to my 2x4 supports to hold them in place. I'm going to get them all tightly lined at each seam like this. Keep them straight. I have this 6-foot level as a straight edge. So in this case, I secured the first sheet in 2 spots at the end and here. This is the side from which I'll be doing all my measuring and layout. So after the second joint, I'm changing what I did here. So the way I have it with these supported near the ends, each on their own 2x4, I have a little movement here. So to fix that, I can just rest both edges on one 2x4, screw them in place. So I'm going to redo this now. This is where it ended up. They're both screwed to this. I'll go over and do the other side. Still nice and straight, and there's no more movement between these joints. First side I lay out is actually going to be the port side, starting with the bow stem right here. Side facing up is going to be the inside of the hull. So this side will get the butt blocks, or in this case fiberglass, and then I will mirror image it to make the starboard side. And all the measurements are going to be coming off this top edge that I'm walking along. The first step in the layout is to mark 2-foot distances along this top edge all the way along. Not going to show up too well on camera here, except the dark marks. But I've got the basic layout done for this port side of the boat. I've boldly marked certain things. Anywhere there's a black line, that's a bulkhead position, and I want those to be clear once the boat is assembled. And then I've made black tick marks at the bottom, B, and the shear line, S, and the combing, C, the topmost line. So this is the aft end of the boat here that we're looking at. These are the basic measurements that are in the plans. Basically everything's, stations are about 2 feet on center, and any other measurements come off of there. This is the stem end. So the stem runs from the top corner of the plywood down to this mark, if you can see it. And then if you can see any of these black marks, I know it doesn't show up much. It'll show up better when I draw the final lines, which I'll do in Sharpie. So that's your basic layout. Side 1, port side. This is the inside of the hull. I'll show you more here. This drawing is showing the inside of the port side, effectively. So as I went through and marked all of these various measurements, I checked them off. Everything's, it's 24 inches on center from the stem, and then any other things that are located not on an exact station have a measurement, an offset, and it says what they're for. I'll just walk you down the other side here. It's not going to make a lot of sense at this point. For example, this black line, that's the aft face of bulkhead 19.25. So when I put that bulkhead in the boat, it'll butt up against that line. It'll extend forward of that line, which is to the left here. So I put X's on that side of the line to help me remember that. And then we've got, this is the aft end of the cockpit combing as well. So I've extended the line all the way up to C, which means combing. S is the shear line. That's just to help me align that shear strake, which is just a visual thing. And then the combing ends here. Going to swoop up to this point. This is the main bulkhead. And then there's a couple more bulkheads or forms laid out up here, again with the black Sharpie marks. So this is what we're going for. That's the shape that's laid out on the plywood, whether you can tell or not. So it's the next day, and the first thing I'm going to do here is turn these sheets of plywood around. I laid this out so the bow is facing in, right towards me here. Doors over there. And I don't want to connect these 3 sheets together and then have to turn around a floppy 21-foot piece of plywood by myself. So I'm going to go ahead and reorient these so that the bow is at the outside end of the shop. So I spared you some final details on rearranging these sheets, but I've got them rearranged so that the bow is over here facing the door. This is the inside of the port side of the boat that we're looking at, and the bottom is facing that way, so I'm at the top. I took away my 2x4s and laid these flat on the floor, and I did that mostly because I couldn't have screws in at these joints anymore because I'm going to fiberglass over them. So this way I can hold it flat for that process. I've got them butted up tight together. I've used my straight edge on this critical top edge that I'm looking at here. The seams are tight, and I've weighted them down with whatever I have in order to hold them flat to each other. And this is the second of the two seams. It's 3 sheets of plywood, so there's 2 seams. There was a little bit of a floppy curve in one of these sheets, so I've got quite a bit of weight on this side to hold it flat to the floor. Got some plastic underneath to protect against epoxy sticking it to the floor. I don't care so much about epoxy on the floor as I care about the plywood sticking. And I'm going to secure these butts together with 2 layers of heavy fiberglass. It's called 1708. It's a 45-degree biax cloth with matte backing, and I'm going to do 2 layers, an 8-inch layer and a 6-inch layer, and that's going to bond these together. The basic plans call for using a 1x4 pine to basically glue and screw these together, and there's a lot to be said for that. It's very simple. It eliminates problems of keeping the sheets flat against each other. It's just a little inelegant, and so I'm going to use fiberglass. It'll be much more flush. I'm not trying to make it flush. It's going to stand proud by whatever the thickness is. 2 layers is approximately not quite 3/16. You can see here the butt plates that are suggested, and there's two seams on this boat. I'm just going to take it another step further. The fiberglass joining these together is going to be at least as strong, probably stronger by some order of magnitude. I don't know how much, but I'm not at all concerned about strength. This is the tabbing for the 2 plywood seams. 2 layers of 1708, 45-degree biax, light matte stitched on the back, and an 8-inch layer that I cut from a larger roll because I can't get 8-inch pre-cut, and then 6-inch. And then I've got 2 10-inch pieces of 60-inch peel ply here that I'll lay over the top, and that'll help me make a nice transition between the fiberglass and the plywood. I cut my roller to 5-inch so that 1 roller width on each side of the seam would wet out what I needed for the 8-inch wide tabbing and 10-inch wide peel ply. So, bigger question. One might ask why I chose to join the panels this way. There are other ways to do this. Perhaps somebody might ask why I didn't scarf the plywood. Well, that might be nice, but one problem with this particular boat is if you scarf the plywood, this is set up to build a hull out of 3 sheets of plywood. So if I was to scarf this plywood with the required angle on the scarf, I would lose at least a foot out of each sheet, if not more, depending on the angle. So that would really screw up the panel layout, and I'd need more plywood. And that's not the end of the world, I guess, but, you know, trying to build this boat on something approaching a budget, and that's what the boat's designed for in the first place. So that's one reason that scarfing or puzzle joints, I've seen like homemade puzzle joints or kind of dovetail joints on a smaller build than this to join several panels. And that's all a nice technique. But in the end, this is really simple, this fiberglass. It's in my wheelhouse. My whole career has been fiberglass. It certainly poses no problem for me to do fiberglass work. It's second nature. I have everything I need. So this was very simple for me to do, and I know it'll be strong. So that's why I chose this versus other methods of combining these panels. I didn't go with the basic external butt block like the plans show, and that is basically how these boats are usually built. I just thought this would be nicer and probably stronger in the end. And one thing about the way I'm going to use this boat, and that's one of the main reasons I upgraded the plywood, and also a reason why I'm going to do many things the way I do, is this boat's likely to stay in the water and out in the weather a lot more than some. We're not going to trailer it back and forth. We want to keep it in the water at a dock or maybe on a lift. So I've got to build it with that in mind. So this is what this looks like with the 2 layers of tabbing and the PO ply on top. And in the center here, got a little place where that sheet is above this one. So I'm going to put some plastic on this and weight it. So here's where we ended up. 2 seams, fiberglass. Got some weight on them to hold the 2 sheets level and flush with one another. That's a little bit of a problem with this particular approach that I'm taking. But this is You know, it's not elegant, but it does the job. I checked all along after I put the weight on, made sure that that seam was flush. And I would have preferred there was some better way to do it, but I didn't know what it is. And then the second seam, this is actually the first one I did. It's towards the bow. It's the bow down there. But we'll let this cure overnight, pull the peel ply, which is always fun, wrap, and we'll see how we did. So here's the first of two seams on the port side of the hull. This is cured overnight, and I pulled the weights and I pulled the peel ply. This is what we're left with. Looks good. It's got a nice texture to it. This is ready for whatever else I need to do. I don't have to do any sanding. And it's got a nice taper here from the topmost layer down over the wider one and then down to the plywood. So this will obviously get some finish sanding at some point, but I'm pleased with this. And obviously the most important thing is how strong is it, and I have no doubts about that. I'll clean up all these little shards sticking over just so I don't cut myself on them. And this is the second of the two seams. This is the one closer to the bow. Looks good as well. One spot here, just where there was a little bit of a air bubble in the peel ply, so it just leaves that. It's no problem. Remember, this is the inside of the hull, and same matte texture on top. It's nice and even. The gentle taper here. I mean, there's still an edge that doesn't just go away, but it's nice and smooth. There's no sharpness to it. I mean, it's definitely there, but this is what I was going for. Again, I brought it out about 10 inches for the width of the peel ply. It's 8-inch tabbing plus about an inch. But this is what I was going for. Looks good. Clean up these sharp pieces of cloth that hang over a little bit. That's not actually a gap. These are two damaged corners of the plywood, so they leave what looks like a large gap, but it's really not. And this other side, this is going to get cut off anyway, but these corners are damaged from the way I got the plywood, but that's okay because I'm cutting this off anyway. You can see on this side, and this is the top side, that seam is nice and tight. I thought I'd recorded some hemming and hawing and excuse making about leaving the panels for another day, but if I did, it's evaporated into the ether. Just talking about maybe waiting a day, and so what do? Flip it over and decide to do it today. So here's the seams we have. At that far edge, you can see the little chunks out of the corner of the plywood that I was showing you from the other side. But otherwise, this seam's nice and tight. It's flush. It's a good looking seam. So I will do the layout and set up some temporary cleats and get this routed. So this is a test setup for how I'm going to route out the plywood on the exterior of the hull once I flip over the sheets. I've set the depth just deep enough to hold one layer of this 6-inch tabbing, roughly, an eighth or less. I think that looks pretty good there. And then I set up these fences just to figure out where they have to go in order to Get my router right here to do the job of the seam. It's going to be 7 5/16 to each side for this spacing right here. So that wasn't bad at all, and now I'm glad I've got it done. Next step is to lay one layer of 6-inch biax in this. This is just wide enough for a layer of 6-inch, and it's just deep enough so that that will end up flush or just slightly below the surface. Here's the second seam, same thing, just deep enough to accept the fiberglass so that it'll be slightly below flush. So I've got just a little Capucel mixed in that, and that'll just help. That'll wet this out, but it'll also help me just make up any tiny voids and give it a better bond when I put the glass in. This is an effective technique, and if you squeegee this enough, it wets out just fine. It's one of the beauties of this stuff. This will just help make up any slight router marks, etc. Fill this little seam, such as it is. I'm not going to leave much in there, just whatever it takes. No more than that. But if you squeegee a slightly thickened mixture like this, it eventually, it basically is just like wetting it out with unthickened resin, as long as it's not too thick. And I like this technique for glassing to surfaces that aren't perfect. This is pretty good, but just thought it'd be a better way to bond this in. And I'm not worried about this very bottom because that's going to get cut off. One of the cameras I had set up to catch all the exciting action actually never got turned on, so you'll have to content yourself with this view of one of the two seams. The other seam was basically identical. This is the exterior of the port side of the boat. It's 3 panels of 3/8 plywood, and they're connected with 2 fiberglass joints. And this is the exterior. I've just completed these. This is one layer of tabbing set into a recess that I milled so that it'll end up flush. So when the time comes, I can ferret it out very easily. And the other side, the inside, has the 2 layers that I did the day before. And here's the second seam. So I'm going to leave this to cure for a day or two, and then I'll flip it back over, and I can finally strike all the final cut lines and cut out this side. And then I can duplicate it to make the starboard side.